read that, and it's from the Gospel according to Saint Matthew. So before Jesus, before the time came for Jesus to deliver his Sermon on the Mount, his fame and name and fame had spread all through Syria and other parts of Jordan, and he traveled all over Galilee. And as you know, he spoke to the multitudes. And there's a difference between the message given by a prophet to the multitudes, to the common man, and to some of the select disciples who are ready to receive the highest teachings. This you will find in the Indian Vedantic tradition also. All the teachings are not given or shared with everybody. There are some teachings which are meant for some of the close inner circle of devotees or disciples of the prophet. In Sri Ramakrishna's case also, you find in the gospel there are so many teachings in general which are meant for the entire world. But there were certain teachings which he gave to his very close disciples, and these teachings he used to, very often you will not find them in uh, in the gospel, because they will be the some of these teachings you will find are there in the great master, because that is what uh, Sri Ramakrishna used to do. Most of the conversations that took place in the gospel where when householder devotees used to come in large numbers and crowd in Dakshineshwar, whereas used to call Narayan and some other disciples, though the monastic disciples used to be present when on other days as well. But most of the teachings he would take extra precaution and care to see that others are not there, because these were the highest teachings which he felt only if the disciple is fit to receive that he would give it. Similarly, here also you will find he saw the multitudes. He used to speak in one way to the multitudes, but he went up to a mountain, and only a few, select few, who were very keen to receive the highest teachings of Jesus, they followed him. And when he was set, this is according to Gospel according to Matthew 5, 1 to 12. This portion of the Bible forms what we call as the Sermon on the Mount. So these are teachings which are essentially very close to that of Vedanta and all other religions. The essential core of all religions is the same, though they may be clothed in different languages. So that's why we find that Jesus, when he spoke to the multitudes, his tone was slightly different and his words were different. But some of the core teachings which he gave, like the Sermon on the Mount, were meant for a few people who were sincere, who had not only had faith in him, but had the capacity to understand and implement these teachings in their day-to-day life. So what were these teachings? And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, the first sermon which he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now this is a very important quotation, very often quoted. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What do you mean by poor in spirit? This is very difficult to understand. Poor in spirit really means one who is full of humility. To receive the teachings, pure in spirit means, if we take it literally, one who is less inclined to spiritual truths. That should not be construed as the meaning of this saying of Jesus. Poor in spirit, in the sense, the spirit with which they live in the world. Normally, if you are full of, when you say a person is full of spirits, is full of ego, full of confidence, and full of haughtiness, if it goes too far, this excess confidence in oneself sometimes can be very harmful. It may lead to a kind of ego which is detrimental to spiritual life. especially when we come to spiritual life. It is this ego which is a big problem which spiritual aspirants face. And for the highest disciples, or for the disciples who are ready for the highest teachings, Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, what is this kingdom of heaven? It's not some imaginary place like the Swarga of the Hindus. Hindus also had their conception of heaven. But when he says heaven, he really means salvation. He means a kind of freedom from the bondage of the body and the world. All the worldly bondages which are against the manifestation of the spirit which is within. So poor in spirit here should not be construed as person who has his spiritual inclinations. He has very poor spiritual inclination. That is not the meaning. That is what people think. But he should be humble. If a man has pride in learning, if he has pride in wealth, in beauty, lineage, or any preconceived idea of what spiritual life is, that preconceived idea can come because of certain dogmas. So here Jesus wants to be very careful that people don't get stuck into any kind of dogma or faith which is not a result of the higher spiritual experience. He is talking from a vantage point, a point of view from where he can see the life of the spirit as the most supreme life, as the most supreme condition in human evolution. So he says, if the mind is not receptive, as in Vedanta we say, a person is not an adhikari, he should have a certain disinclination for the things which are worldly. Otherwise, one cannot be spiritual. If one is not disillusioned, as it happened in the case of Arjuna, when Sri Krishna gave his advice or gave his message, Arjuna was fit because he was poor in spirit, in the sense he was full of humility, not knowing what to do. He was confronted by so many problems because of the difference in the attitude of worldly people and the people with spiritual inclinations. That is a fight which is very common. And unless that Vishada comes, that is why the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is known as Vishada Yoga. In that, Arjuna is perplexed. Not that he did not like, he was a very powerful person, full of ego and full of pride in his strength. But still, the Lord felt that he deserves some kind of spiritual knowledge before he starts the fight. Otherwise, he can't play the role which he was destined to play. That is protection of dharma. So he was very particular, Sri Krishna, that I'm just muting everybody. Yeah. So Arjuna was perplexed because of his ignorance. He was not sure what to do in the situation he found himself in. And on one side was his pride, was his ego, which was trying to assert itself, and his wounded pride, because they were deprived of the kingdom, as all of us know. So when that wounded pride, which very often happens to people who take to spiritual life, what happens is, normally, because you have been following one particular inclination, one particular way of life, one particular attitude towards life, towards the life in the world, where ambition, power, desire, these are all considered to be legitimate pursuits, because that is what a majority of the human beings think is the right path. Unless they get disillusioned, it never happens. So that is why this Vishada or some kind of disillusionment was necessary for Arjuna. Some kind of disillusionment that power or ego is not enough to negotiate one's life in the world. It is in fact the egoless person, the humble person, who can make the most out of this world and negotiate this world in a much better way and be full of peace, joy, and freedom. So, if one wants the kingdom of heaven, Jesus Christ, like Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Because only the humble, those who have that attitude, that seeker's attitude, they want to seek something, they want to know the truth of things, they want to know the truth of the spirit. Only such people will be able to attain to the kingdom of heaven. So that's why Jesus here says, blessed are the poor in spirit. That is, poor in spirit here means one has to be humble. And that humility, in the Gita also, if you see, tam vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. There are three things which are essential to get salvation or to enter the kingdom of heaven. Tad vidhi, try to understand that great truth. How? Pranipatena, by bowing down in humility. Pariprashnena, by asking questions. That curiosity increases only when we start asking questions. To a curious person is always humble. The child is curious because the child has this kind of humility. It is not full of ego. The ego of a child is easily satisfied. It does not have the ego of an adult who thinks he knows everything. So one has to have the nature of a child. If there is egolessness or humility, and if there is a tendency to ask questions, curiosity, I mean a healthy curiosity, not curiosity to know anything and everything, curiosity to know about the spiritual truths. That curiosity, pariprashnena. Pranipatena means humility, pariprashnena, by pariprashna means asking constant questions. That curiosity is never satisfied of a child. He wants to know more and more things. He wants to know the truth. So that quest for truth is what is meant here. And sevaya, pariprashnena sevaya, by seva. By not only humility, but by serving those people who have this knowledge. Normally, to acquire knowledge, normally when we go to schools and colleges, we have to pay fees. But in those days, there was no question of fees. You had to get knowledge by humility, by asking questions, and also to some kind of service. So some kind of service of the guru or the person who is giving you knowledge, whether it is the teacher, a secular teacher, or a guru. So these were the conditions. Pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya tadvidhi. Try to get that knowledge. So that is why Jesus also says that blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now next is, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now what does this mourning mean? Now this is another very important sermon which can be confusing. Now for an ordinary person, mourning means he will mourn the loss of a child or a relative or somebody who is a very close acquaintance. That is mourning. Literally translated, mourning means you mourn for people whom you lose in this world, or you mourn for when you lose riches, when you lose your worldly goods. So if these things are there, you normally mourn. So this is not is what is meant here. Because if that was the case, then all people who mourn should be able to get comfort from God. But that is not what Jesus is meaning here. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. They shall be comforted by God. Now, here the mourning has a different connotation, a different meaning. Mourning here means yearning. They are mourning the people who really want a blessed life, a life of peace, joy, and freedom, want salvation, want a life of the spirit. Normally, they will mourn that they don't have those tendencies, they don't have those spiritual tendencies. That is what Jesus means here in this sermon, in this uh, line, in this sentence. He means, blessed are they that mourn. They are mourning that they are not able to establish themselves in the kingdom of the spirit. Spiritual values, though they agree, though they appreciate that, they still mourn because they have not reached that level. So, that kind of yearning, we all mourn, but for what? For the loss of worldly pleasures, possessions, and all those things. But that is not the kind of mourning of which Jesus Christ is speaking here. The mourning which Jesus Christ calls blessed is very rare because it arises from a sense of spiritual loss, spiritual loneliness. That kind of spiritual loss or vishada which Arjuna felt, though he was a very powerful person, full of ego, full of pride, and full of confidence in his ability, where did this spiritual loneliness, this spiritual loss come to him? That came to him because his conscience told him that even if you kill all the Kauravas and if you win this victory, what will you gain? Will it solve your problem? I mean, that was the question he is asking, and that's why he's arguing with Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita in the first chapter, that what shall I gain by killing all these people? So that kind of mourning, he started mourning. Not just, he's not mourning his loss. He's not afraid of his own loss of his worldly property, or he is ready to fight. But some kind of compassion has arisen in him, and he feels that this spiritual, a kind of spiritual loss or spiritual loneliness as a result of this war. He might gain materially, he might gain the worldly goods which he is seeking as a result of this battle. If he is victorious, he knows he will be able to enjoy all the worldly things. But still, he says, I still feel a kind of emptiness, some kind of spiritual loneliness, which is what mourning is all about. Here, Jesus wants to make it clear, the mourning which we have for losing worldly things is not the mourning of the wise. The mourning of the wise or the disciples whom he was addressing through this sermon, blessed are they that mourn, was the mourning of the fact that I need God to comfort me. If I give up the world, if I don't run after the world because they are transitory, and if I seek spiritual uh, comfort or spiritual grace, that sense of loss of not having got that spiritual grace is a kind of mourning. So that is why all the sadhakas in the initial stages of their sadhana, they find it a bit, a sense of loss, a sense of spiritual loneliness they feel. It's a strange kind of feeling that you are on the path to God and you are not able to get that. You somehow want God to come and comfort you. No doubt God sends you all this wonderful piece of advice through his teachings and all. But till we experience them, till we experience the truth of these wonderful words of the Lord, we find there is in us, in our minds, a sense of mourning. And this is what he says. The moment you mourn, the moment that Vishada came, and Arjuna told Sri Krishna, see, I am getting confused. Please help me. Tell me what is true for me. And then Arjuna is given the whole discourse of Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, third chapter, all the valuable truths, just like Jesus is delivering the sermon on the uh, top of the mountain, where only some selected disciples who had given up the world, who had given up worldly pursuits, and who were not attached to the world, such people were really mourning, and they wanted some kind of nectar in the form of some comforting words and the grace of the Lord which they get. So most of us are quite satisfied with the worldly life that we are leading. So that is not mourning. That is while when we lose certain things. No doubt it's like a trigger which makes us think of spiritual realities, which makes us think of the spiritual truths. But till that stage comes, I mean, that stage will not come just by worldly loss. That is not what we have to mourn. If we mourn for our worldly loss, then we'll try to replace it. Then we will try to find out ways and means to make up for the loss which we have suffered in the world. Then we'll, some by hook or crook, will try to get those things. But this is not what Jesus means. When he says, "Blessed are they that mourn," what he means is that of mourning should be of the fact that we have not reached that or received that spiritual grace which should be accessible to people who pray, who are sincere, who are yearning for the life of the Spirit. So God has to shower His grace today or tomorrow. And Jesus promises that blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Today or tomorrow, there may be some delay because we are not yet done with the world. We still mourn for worldly things. The day we stop mourning for our worldly things, we just accept whatever things come in our way, and we really mourn for spiritual things, then they will be comforted. That is the idea. So, that the kind of mourning that Christ called is expressed in one of the beautiful passages in the Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. He says, "O Lord God, when shall I be made one with thee and be molten into thy love, so that I wholly forget myself? Be thou in me, and I in thee, and grant that we may so abide, always together in one." So that is the comfort he is seeking. He is sensing a kind of spiritual loneliness, and he wants to make it up by filling it up with God in his heart. And he wants to be secure in the company of the Lord. That is what Thomas Kempis is saying in the Imitation of Christ. So that is the kind of mourning. When such mourning comes, when you really feel that you need somebody, not like worldly people who seem to be our own and then suddenly slip away. There's so much of delusion, repeated delusion. What people whom we think are our own, things that we think are our own, possessions that we think are our own, they don't stay for long. And as a result of this transient nature of the world, when the real mourning comes for something permanent, something secure, something loving, something eternally loving, something very unselfish, something which takes us, accepts us as we are, and still bestows or bestows their grace upon us. So only a Lord is capable of doing that. Lord is of infinite compassion, infinite kindness, infinite. He promises us infinite strength, security, and also His grace and love. So that's why he says, "O Lord God, when shall I be made one with thee?" This is the kind of mourning which Jesus is referring to. Blessed are they that mourn. Just as Thomas Kempis said, "O Lord, when shall I be made one with thee?" He's mourning for that. He's mourning because he knows that Lord is my own, but somehow I am not able to feel Him. I'm not able to be one with the Lord, so that my troubles are ended forever, that I'll be in peace, joy forever. So he was mourning for that loss, for the spiritual loss. That is what this uh, uh, the second sentence says. Then the next one is, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Now, ignorance and delusion are characteristic of the degenerate mind. The mind which does not understand the importance of the spirit over matter, it is always likely to cling to matter. So what happens? They the ignorance is there, but the sense of ego that they know everything. The problem with ignorance is that it is No doubt, ignorance is the cause of delusion. And this ignorance makes us think of things which are of temporary nature, things which are going to be snatched away from us as permanent. It is the effect of Maya or ignorance, the delusion, that we think of a mirage as real water and we run after it. The world is like that. So, this gives us a feeling that we don't need God, that ego comes. So, meekness here means knowing fully well that without God I am nothing. If we are haughty or if we are arrogant and think that we know everything in the world, we don't even know that we are ignorant of many things. And we think the things that we know, the things that we possess are our own, and we are so arrogant or full of pride because of those possessions that such people out of delusion feel that these are enough for us. Nothing can shake us, nothing. But when blows come, when these things prove to be insufficient, when we live our life, when experience teaches us that no matter whether you have wealth, whether you have power, whether you have position, everything comes to zero when we are beset with certain difficulties. And in such situations, our ego does not help us. Our ego, in fact, becomes our enemy. So the sooner we give up our ego and become meek, in that sense, he's saying meek. Meek has a negative connotation also, that if anybody decides to criticize you, abuse you, you just keep quiet. That is not meekness. So that is why Sister Nivedita says, when Jesus said, be like a lamb, he said, you be meek like a lamb. Doesn't mean that you have to be weak like a lamb. Meekness is not out of weakness here. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Why does Christ say they shall inherit the earth? In fact, we see to the contrary. Those who are not meek, those who are arrogant, full of pride, ego, and apparent strength, they seem to be grabbing everything, power, position, and inheriting the earth. They are trying to control more and more wealth, more and more property, and they are supposed to be not meek. But here, Jesus Christ says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So, what does this meekness mean? It is a kind of spiritual meekness. It's not worldly meekness. We should not confuse it, because for to do well in the world, I mean, to gather money, to gather power, to gather position, which of course is not eternal, which is temporary, but still, you cannot be meek and then at the same time gather all these things, worldly things around you. So that cannot be true, that a person who is meek will inherit the earth. In what sense Jesus says this? Blessed are the meek. Why does Christ say that they shall inherit the earth? At first sight, this seems very difficult to understand. Inherit To inherit the earth means to be one with God, because in Gita also says this whole creation, this whole earth, which is supposed to be the a creation of God, belongs to God. If we have that kind of faith, if you don't have that faith, that's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say God laughs when two brothers quarrel among themselves and say, this piece of earth is mine, this land is yours. The whole creation belongs to God. So God laughs. God says, see, this is my creation. These people are fighting with each other for this paltry piece of earth, whereas the whole creation belongs to me. So we inherit the earth if we come closer and closer to God. So only the blessed are the meek, because they are not arrogant, they are not ignorant, they are not deluded by the fact that a few pieces of gold or a few pieces of wealth, houses, property, and all those things will make them all powerful. Somebody else will come and destroy it, and he will have to give everything. He will lose everything. There is a chance. So there is that fear also. So inheriting the earth is not in the physical sense. Here we inherit the earth in a different way, because you see the whole world to be your own. Then what is not yours, everything is yours. Wherever you are, you belong to the Lord, and whatever is the Lord's belongs to you. So A person with such humility, a person with meekness, spiritual meekness, the word meek has to be construed in this particular way. This weakness means this dependence on God, this faith in God, that God is my own, and whatever God owns or whatever God has created is my own. So, what need I have to gather, accumulate things around myself? Swami Vivekananda says in Karma Yoga that people think there are two tendencies. One is to gather things around you, full of egotism. That person wants everything to be, it wants everything around himself. And he says a person tries to accumulate everything around himself because of his ego, because of his sense of possession, because of his pride, and because of all the evil qualities which make him think that I should own at the expense of others. But he says nature does not allow him to do. Nature holds him by the neck and forces him to let go of the hold that he has on certain things and wealth and all these things which he has. Because that is the rule of nature. You cannot own, you cannot inherit the earth that way physically. So, inheriting the earth, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, should be understood in this way. The meek who have surrendered their egos to God, God takes possession. I mean, God completely, they own, they become one with God. Yoga is actually a technique by which you hook yourself or you attach yourself to the Supreme, who is the owner or the creator of this whole universe. So if you belong to God, then the whole creation belongs to God. In that sense, you inherit the earth. So the essential thing here is to attach oneself through yoga to God. That is what he means. What then is meekness here? Meekness is to live a life of self-surrender to God, free from the sense of me and mine. I don't want to have a little portion of this earth to be mine. When the whole earth belongs to me by virtue of being the son of God or the daughter of God. So with the idea that it doesn't mean that we have to get rid of wealth, family and friends, but we should get rid of that idea of possessiveness that they belong to us. That should go. They belong to God. We should think of ourselves as God's servants. We are just trustees. And the property or the wealth that God has given us it is God's wealth which we are handling right now. We have no absolute authority over it because the day we die, everything will be left behind. So, in the truest sense, this wealth which I have the privilege to look after as a trustee, and God has given me that privilege of being trustee, if that humbleness or that meekness comes, then you inherit the earth. It is only such meek people, in the sense such egoless people, who really inherit the earth and really enjoy it. Others don't enjoy it. The ego makes them hold on to these things, but they hardly they're full of fear of losing it. So they don't really enjoy the things they have gathered around themselves, accumulated around themselves. So conquerors like Alexander and all who had a dream that I'll inherit the earth, finally they did not get anything except trouble. People who try to gather things around themselves and spend their whole time taking so much of trouble to accumulate things which they ultimately it proves to be futile and nothing is left. So here Jesus is saying it is better you surrender your ego to God, and when he showers his grace on you, the whole creation, why a limited portion of the creation? Why are you satisfied with this limited love? Why are you satisfied with this limited security? Just be unlimited. If you surrender to God, God will provide you with whatever you need. Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam. So that is why he says, by sincerely giving up our ego to God, uh, by being meek, we gain everything, we will inherit the earth. In that sense, he says that. Now we come to the next sermon. He says, "Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." What is the righteousness for which Christ wants us to hunger? Everybody, we know the word righteousness. Righteousness means we do certain things which according to us are the right things, or according to ethics, according to morals. And still we feel that sometimes we are cheated, and then we feel that it is my rightful share, or it's my right to get these things, but I don't have it. I have been cheated of this. That feeling often comes. This is not what is meant by righteousness. On the face of it, it looks, "Blessed are they who do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." The idea normally people get is that if you are cheated right and left, if you are always hungering for righteousness in the world, then the Lord will come and help you. That is not what is meant here. See, there are these truths which Jesus is telling us in the Sermon on the Mount are very, are great spiritual truths. We should not interpret it from the point of view of a worldly person. That is the danger in trying to understand these things from a worldly perspective. So, righteousness, very often in the Bible, if you see some other places, very often with the word righteousness, the quote here is, "Blessed are they who which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." Now, this righteousness is absolute goodness or union with God. That is the hunger. Union, that is absolute. Righteousness has been used in the Bible in many places. When they say be righteous, means be close to God. What is moral? Swami Vivekananda very clearly explained this particular thing. He said, how do you decide what is moral, what is good, what is bad, what is moral, what is immoral? He says it is very simple. You can't classify things. Say, for example, it may be bad in certain circumstances, but it may be good in some other circumstances. So, what is absolute goodness, absolute evil, we do not know. And we can go on arguing what is good for one. You may feel that nationalism is good for you. It is good for your nation, but it means something bad for another nation. Because if you become rich, it is at the expense of some poor nation. So when you say it is good to be a nationalist, to have pride in your nation, at the same time it is not an absolute good, because it is doing harm to somebody else. Some other nation is suffering. So there are, Jesus was very particular. So he said, this is not the goodness which he means. He does not mean that kind of righteousness, that you feel it is your rightful share and you fight for it. That is not righteousness. Righteousness is the thirst to get God Himself, to achieve God, or to reach God Himself. That is righteousness. So that is absolute goodness, absolute righteousness. The hunger and thirst after God, or to realize God in spirit, is what he means by righteousness. So he says, when you seek that righteousness, only then, not what you deserve. It's if you seek wealth, that you are a rightful heir to this wealth, or you rightfully deserve this wealth, you rightfully deserve this property, and you try to fight for it. That is not the righteousness which Jesus means here. Here he means that righteousness which makes you, it's a hunger or a thirst to get the absolute good, which is God. So we should start with self-effort. We know it is easy to get some worldly things. If we work hard, if we strive, hunger and thirst after worldly goods, we may get it in a day or two, or maybe in a few years. But to want the absolute good, to want absolute security, absolute peace, absolute joy, absolute happiness, which we can get if we possess God Himself, because He is the supreme. He is the one who has created this world. He is the creator, preserver, and destroyer of this world. So what greater achievement is there other than to achieve, to righteously hunger and thirst for this God, who is absolutely good, absolutely holy, absolutely pure, and absolutely powerful. So, all the absolute qualities which we can find in God is what we should thirst or hunger after, and they will be filled. So, Christ is promising us here, Jesus Christ, that those who hunger for these things, those who thirst after these things, after righteousness, they will be filled. So that is the promise that Jesus gives us. Then he says, there is a beautiful example of this righteousness, of that thirst or hunger. Sri Ramakrishna used to give that. The story is also there in the Bible. So once one guru, a disciple goes to a guru and he said, why can't I find God? The guru understood that this person doesn't have that thirst or hunger, that righteousness. He is not seeking that righteousness to enable him to see God or to realize God. So he just doesn't say anything. He knows that his desire or hunger or thirst is not real. It's just superficial. So he takes that disciple and says, come near the river. So they go to the river. Then he says, let us just walk a little inside. After going there, he holds the head of the disciple and pushes it below the water. And naturally, he is gasping for breath. He is not able to breathe. And then he holds it for a few moments, and then finally, when he comes out, the guru says, now how did you feel? He said, I was struggling for air. If you hold me like that, I was just gasping and somehow wanted to breathe. So the guru says, that is exactly what I mean when I say, if you hunger and thirst for righteousness, if you hunger and thirst for that breath, the eternal breath of God, the feeling which you got, that intense hunger, that intense thirst, or that intense breathlessness which you felt when you are underwater, when your head was, that you should feel in this world. If you feel that, then you will get God. So that is why Jesus says, those who hunger and thirst after death, blessed are they. They are blessed, really blessed, if they hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be fulfilled or filled with grace and uh, grace and peace and joy. Now comes, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. So here there is a beautiful quotation from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Patanjali says, we always speak of a disturbed mind and an uneasy mind. That is because of that calmness, undisturbed calmness, peace and joy, which is a result of God experience, doesn't come to us because we have not controlled our mind. The first step, of course, after God vision, you will get it. But before we strive, even before we start on our journey towards God vision, we require some kind of undisturbed calmness, even if we have to do sadhana, if we have to achieve something in life. So, here when Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Now, what kind of mercy will they get? We want mercy. We want to be forgiven or pardoned for our mistakes. But at the same time, we would not pardon others for their foolishness or for their mistake. We have to just forgive and forget. We don't do it and we expect God to forgive us. So here he is saying that to have an undisturbed and calm mind, he says, is attained by cultivating friendliness towards the happy. Maitri. The word used is Maitri. That's why you should always seek happy people. Not people who are happy with things of the world. They may apparently be happy, but then they will, for example, a drug addict or a person who is drinking alcohol, he seems to be happy, but he's not happy. You should really seek out and find out happy people who are having that joy within, who don't depend on external things for their joy. They are known as Atma Rama. Atma Rama means one who gets joy in his own self. He doesn't need anybody's comment or anybody's praise or anybody's criticism. He doesn't bother because he knows who he is. He's so confident of himself and his relationship with God, that he is Atma Rama. He is very happy within himself because God is with us, with him. So the people who are friendly towards the happy. So Maitri, that is the word which is used. Merciful means they should be friendly towards the happy, or have mercy and compassion towards those who are unhappy. In this world, there are many unhappy people who, due to ignorance and delusion, have chosen to make themselves unhappy. Very often, happiness is a matter of choice. We choose to be happy or we choose to be unhappy. If we have desires, if we unnecessarily desire things which we really do not want, we really do not need 2, 3, 4 cars, because that is not, we can do the serve the same purpose by one car. But we make ourselves unhappy because somebody else has 5 cars and we think we just have 2 cars. It would be nice if I had a car for everybody. So that there is every chance, or most of the time, it is we ourselves make ourselves happy or unhappy, the happiness or unhappiness. So, mercy and compassion for the unhappy. By knowing, we should have mercy because it is because of ignorance that they are unhappy. If possible, if we have compassion or if we have mercy, we can solve their problem. We can try to convince them that what you think or what you are doing is ignorance. You have no reason to be unhappy because you don't have 5 cars. Why can't you be happy? The happiness is somewhere else. If we seek happiness at the wrong place, at the wrong thing, by getting the wrong thing or by trying to enjoy the wrong thing, then it is our fault. So we have a choice to make ourselves happy or unhappy. That's why mercy and compassion for the unhappy. Friendliness towards the happy. If we have friendliness, then we will be sharing their happiness, real joy. That is known as satsanga. But at the same time, you should not hate those people who are unhappy. If you hate or avoid such people who are unhappy, then your friendliness towards the happy also will suffer. You get some satsanga, you get some happiness out of satsanga, of real being in the company of being friendly with the really happy people. But you should also learn the art of being compassionate or having some kind of mercy towards the unhappy and delight in the virtuous. If there is some virtuous person, if there is somebody who is showing broadness of heart, love for all humanity, love for you, love for somebody, concern for you, if such people are there, you should delight in their company. You should delight that there are some virtuous people. But God, the world is such that you won't get virtuous people everywhere. There's an equal proportion or even more of wicked people around you, and indifference towards the wicked. So 4 attitudes, Patanjali says, is very important if we want to have a undisturbed calmness around us. So mercy is very important quality. That's why Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And if God showers his mercy upon us, then we can expect a calm and an undisturbed calmness. We can attain that. So Patanjali says, undisturbed calmness is attained by cultivating. So just mercy is not enough. That is one part of our attitude towards our life. There are people who are friendly. There are people who are happy. So you have to cultivate friendliness towards them. There are people who are unhappy. You don't have to hate them or you don't have to avoid them. You have to be merciful and compassionate for them. And because knowing fully well that it is because of their ignorance, and if possible, it's not always easy to remove that ignorance or delusion. Even if you tell them this is delusion, he will not be convinced. If you go and tell a person that you don't need 5 cars, he'll perhaps get angry on you. Said, what is that? Is none of your business. If he prefers, if he's wicked, then indifference is better. That's why Patanjali gives another idea. If he is really unhappy because of ignorance, and if he listens to you, then tell him. But if he is wicked and he says, "No, I prefer to be wicked, I prefer to have 5 cars and I'll do anything to get those cars," then you have to be indifferent to such a person, because their mercy will not help. Thakur used to give a beautiful example of Tiger Narayana. He says you should be merciful towards ignorant people, towards poor people, towards people who are ignorant. But that doesn't mean that you have to be friends with them. You have to be indifferent to them. You have to be careful and watch them from a distance and not go near. So these are the tigers who are wicked people. So delight in the virtuous, but at the same time, if you are indifferent to such people, but you have to express your delight and praise people who are good. So that is why sometimes, even if you see a small good quality in somebody, if you go on praising that person, if you find delight in the little virtue they have, you see, every human being has some virtue which most of the people don't have. So that virtue, if it is there, if you glorify that virtue, if you uh, uh, if you praise that virtue, or if you delight in that virtue, delight in the virtuous, if you show your delight that, oh, I am so happy that uh, you have such good qualities, you are so helpful to people. So it's not just empty praise, but it is really helping us to attain to undisturbed calmness. Whenever the mind is not calm, whenever there is some kind of disturbance, you make know it for sure that these 4 things we are not practicing. Either one of the 4 we are not practicing. If we are according to Patanjali or according to the Jesus, if we practice these 4 virtues according to Patanjali, we should, and we it is a definite fact that we will have undisturbed calmness, peace, and joy. First, it is worth repeating again, cultivating friendliness towards the happy. Happy, I mean truly joyful. Happy is not the right word. People can be happy because of many things. There can be induced happiness, there can be happiness because one is an Atmarama. So, friendliness towards the people who are really happy, who are really peaceful, really joyful because of a right attitude in life. Mercy and compassion for the unhappy. First of all, when you see unhappy people, know it for certain that many of them are unhappy because of their ignorance. So, if it is possible, if they are not wicked, then one has to show mercy and compassion. But there are people who not only choose to be unhappy, they are capable of making others unhappy. Like they say, there's an English proverb, the idle mind is a devil's workshop. So the devil is constantly, the wicked people are constantly, they themselves are unhappy and they want to make others unhappy. So such people, you should be indifferent. Should not get too much involved in them, just be indifferent to them and see that they don't impact you. And mercy and compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous. And if you find that's it's not that everybody around you is, there will be some virtue even in that unhappy person. But if we can glorify that and if we can give some importance, it doesn't cost much to delight or to celebrate virtue. It can be anybody's virtue. If we do that, you will find that it results in undisturbed calmness in your own mind. So that's why they say unselfishness is more paying, but people don't have the patience to practice it. By some unselfish act, by some little praise or little acknowledgement of the virtues in others, though there may be many vices, many wicked things, but if you stress or give some importance to the virtuous side of it, of them, through mercy and compassion, and understand that all that they do is not because of any wrong attitude, but because of some kind of ignorance and delusion. But the moment that delusion goes, they will also become virtuous. So with that hope, one should be merciful. So that's why Jesus gives so much importance to this. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Because if you give mercy, if you show mercy on others, then you can expect that when you really need it, God will give you, God will be merciful to you. Because whatever we do, that's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Brahmanandi also used to say, that what is the difference between man and God? If you hurt him once, will forget all your previous kindness, however kind you may be to a person. If you hurt him once, he will forget all the previous kindness, the previous good things he has done to you. And you will just latch on to that one incident and get angry on him, and then and remember that one time you have failed. But if you forget God and sin against him hundreds of times, if you forget, God forgives us. That is the difference between man may not forgive. But a godly man or a God himself, when he incarnates, or a godly type of people, they will forgive your hundreds of trespasses. They will have infinite patience. And even if you sin again, if you cause trouble to him for hundreds of times, still he will forgive all your faults. And remember the few times you sincerely prayed to him. God remembers that. Oh, he might have forgotten me. It's okay. But at least he has remembered me. He has done a little sadhana. So that is the difference between the grace or mercy of a God, mercy of God and mercy of man. So we have to be as godly as possible. So God does not, sin exists only in man's eyes. God does not look at sins. Even if one act of kindness is enough to make him happy. And finally we come, there are other quotations also, but we'll come to an end now. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So these are the most fundamental principle, the pure in heart. Now, every great spiritual prophet or every great spiritual tradition in the world, including Jesus, have given so much of importance to purity. So somebody asked Swamiji, how do you define purity? Purity means the less gross you are, the more subtle you are, the more pure you are. So from gross to subtle to the causal, and when you go beyond the cause, when you worship God as pure spirit, you are the most pure. Otherwise, if you still worship mammon, that's why Jesus said, you cannot worship God and mammon at the same time. Though it is not part of the Sermon on the Mount, but Jesus said that. So if you are gross, then you are not pure. The more subtle or the more noble you are, the more you live in the realm of the spirit for a majority of your time of the day, and giving less importance to material things, and such people are known as pure in heart. Because the mind always tells you, that's why Swamiji said, when there is a conflict between the mind and the heart, you follow your heart, not the mind. Mind is very confusing, let me tell you. The mind, because mind is, heart is the seat of buddhi, is the heart, not the physical heart which pumps blood. The heart is the center, which is there in the, which is known as Vijnanamaya Kosha. It is much higher than Manomaya Kosha. Manomaya Kosha can have a positive side and can have a negative side, and positive influence and negative influence. But when the buddhi awakens, when the heart awakens, the real heart, that's why Swamiji said, if the heart tells you something, from the depth of your heart, if you feel that somebody is merciful to you, somebody is graceful to you, showering his grace, somebody is kind to you, somebody is all merciful like God. So the heart, if it tells you, then you have to follow the heart. Then you'll never make a mistake. Because the heart normally tells us the right thing, but the mind keeps us guessing. So don't rely too much on the mind, just rely on simple, pure, childlike faith. That is what Jesus says. Blessed are the pure in heart. It is in this context only he said, because children are pure, because they see more of the spirit than the matter. It is we who rob the child of this pure vision of life. He He loves creation, he loves God, he loves divinity, he sees everything as the divine play. But unfortunately, that purity of the heart goes away. And that is a result of too much of development of Manomaya Kosha. From the Vijnanamaya Kosha, he comes down to a one level, and then his sharpness of mind, the mad rat race we have to make our children intelligent, to make them very intelligent, to know this, know that. My child knows this, my child knows that, even at a very young age. Nobody says my child has a wonderful heart. My child has developed his heart. He is so noble. He goes on giving gifts to others. He is very concerned about others. He is merciful others. He is kind. Nobody bothers if a child is not kind, but they are bothered if his mind is not developed. That lopsided development of, of development of the mind at the cost of development of the heart. Not that mind should not be developed, there should be 50-50. We need a rational approach to life, otherwise we'll make mistakes. We should not be fully dependent on faith, blind faith, but we should have some kind of intellectual development or rational development. But if it is exceeded beyond a limit, at the cost of the development of the heart, then this sermon says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." So that he would rather, Swamiji says, I would have rather more heart and less brain than more brain and less heart. So this is what this final, we will close here. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And this is a universal message. You will find it everywhere. This purity is insisted upon. And this purity increases in proportion to the value you give to higher and higher things, to the higher koshas, to Vijnanamaya kosha, to your buddhi, to your heart, to your spiritual heart, and to higher levels, joy, bliss, ananda. The more you go towards the subtle aspect of your personality, the more pure you are. Impurity is always in the gross. Whenever you come down a few levels below the level of the mind to the pranamaya and anna kosha, there are more chances of becoming impure. And we close with, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Now, peacemakers here are the pure people who rid their heart. They remove from their heart all the vices like jealousy, envy, anger, and all those vices which make you gross, which make you stick to the gross, which make you attached to the world. Those who detach from that, they are known as the real peacemakers. They want peace at any cost, because attachment to the world comes at a price. You have to give up your peace. You lose your peace. So peacemakers are they who are men of the spirit, who prefer to live a life of the spirit rather than to live a life of the world. If there is a more proportion of the life of the spirit, though we cannot say that we cannot give up the world like that. Living in the world is not a problem. But if we give more importance to the spirit, then we are known as peacemakers. Because people who are attached to the spirit, attached to the subtle, attached to higher and nobler things, they will always want peace. They won't come with a confrontation. They would not like confrontation with other people. Because confrontation is only at the lower level. At the higher level, when envy, jealousy, and all these things which result in lack of peace, a person who is having that, perhaps in the gross world we see them dominating and irritating other people. But know it for certain, they cannot have, absolutely without any doubt, they cannot have peace of mind. A person who has been responsible, has been very gross in his desires, in his attitude towards life, can never have peace. Because that is the very nature of the gross world. The more tamasic you become, the more lower in your personality, the more the lower personality develops, the more peacelessness comes in your life. That peace goes away. Peace comes only when there is an increase in sattva. Even rajas results in lack of peace. There's so much of restlessness. You can see some children or some people, they're absolutely restless because they have not been trained to go beyond the gross. The moment they go to the Vijnanamaya Kosham, the moment their heart develops, and not just the mind. If the mind develops more than the heart, then the mind becomes restless, then the thoughts come very fast, confuses you, and peacelessness is the result. But if you want peace, then you have to take care of the heart. So that's why blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. So we will conclude now. We've just taken 10 minutes more, and I'm very happy that the Sermon on the Mount, which is Jesus' message, Jesus Christ's message on this auspicious Christmas day. I wish you all a very happy Christmas. Christmas is all about these wonderful messages of Jesus Christ, the real celebration of Christmas. Many people are unhappy that they have not been able to celebrate Christmas the way they would have done, but perhaps it is Lord Jesus' will that it is always better to celebrate Christmas by understanding Jesus' wonderful messages which he gave us to reach the real kingdom of God which is within us, to become Atma Rama. To that is the real joy, not in Christmas trees and other external things. We try to express it through that, no doubt. But one should remember the real spirit of Christmas is to remember the wonderful teachings, especially some wonderful core teachings of Jesus, like the Sermon on the Mount, which, like all the other Vedanta and other religions, focus on purity, development of the heart, and so many other virtues, which makes us more and more sattvic and nearer and closer to the kingdom of heaven which is within us. So I take your leave. If there are some questions, you can just ask. Tomorrow we will have the Gospel of Holy Mother. Tomorrow is Saturday. And Sunday we will have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna as usual. We don't have a Gita class tomorrow. If there are any questions, you can just type them in the chat, or you can ask. Oh, there is a question. What did Jesus Christ say to us when crucified? Oh, it's a nice question. This little girl has asked this question. What did Jesus Christ say to us when crucified? When he was crucified, he gave one of the most powerful messages he lived for and died for. He gave up his physical body, and if you remember, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. In fact, when he was crucified, unjustly of course, for saying that he was the king, what he meant, that's why when we read the entire Bible, including the Sermon on the Mount, we have to remember when he says of kingdom of heaven, he means the kingdom of the spirit. Heaven is nothing but nothing material in heaven. We have created fancy heavens where there are all these wonderful things, angels and all those things. But that is not the heaven which Jesus speaks of. So when he was crucified, He could have easily saved himself. They said, "Do you deny? Do you accept that?" He said, Yes, I am the king." Because he was the king of the world of spirits. And they thought he is saying that he is the king of this world, in the material world. He had nothing to do with material. So that's why a lot of people feel that he could have saved himself. Why did he agree to be crucified? Because he really saw that the kingdom of spirit is the only world that is worth striving for. The spiritual life, or the life of the spirit, is the only thing that is worth striving for. And this body, if it doesn't go today, it will go some other day. It has to perish. So that is the message to he is telling us when he is crucified that, see, I just give up this body because it's a useless thing. It doesn't make any sense for me. And Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. He was merciful, and he said, Father, you please forgive them. They think I want to become the king of the world, the worldly life. They are so much attached to their world, their worldly things, their worldly uh, efforts, that they feel that all people are like them. This is what happens when crucifixion was an extreme, of course. But every day we are holding, or we are carrying our own crosses. Jesus was made to carry his own cross. So we are carrying our own crosses, especially people who have faith in the life of the Spirit. Perhaps their life would not be as easy. It would not be as difficult as Jesus Christ. We will not suffer so much of persecution. But in our own way, we have to carry our own crosses. That is the greatest message he gave when he was crucified. He said, I not only carried my cross, but was crucified on my own cross, because I know that is going to give me eternal life. If Jesus had so much faith in the life of the Spirit, he said, these people cannot do anything. They can crucify my body, but they can't crucify my spirit. I am not going to give up the life of the spirit for a paltry thing as human body. So also Sri Ramakrishna's life, when he had cancer, he was tirelessly trying to give his message, the message of Chaitanya Hope. So this message of Jesus Christ was something similar to what Sri Ramakrishna said in Kashipur towards the end of his life. He was not crucified, but it was in a sense he had taken upon the sins of Kirish and all other people upon himself. And day by day he was dying out of cancer. So it was also like a crucifixion. And in that condition, before going, he blessed everybody on January 1st. We are approaching January 1st soon. So that is the Kalpataru day. He said, Tomader Chaitanya Ho. He knew that just live in the life of the Spirit. Please don't give any importance to this world. This is what all prophets say, and that is what Jesus said in a very powerful way when he was crucified. Unfortunately, we do not learn that lesson. We think it is only he who was crucified. No, he is asking every one of us in our own way to carry our crosses, to be crucified, in the sense to not to give so much importance to the world and live the life of the Spirit. So it's a message for all of us. That is what he's telling us. Anyway, it's a very good question. So there's another question which says, if we want to avoid the wicked, will they not become more wicked? Okay. So why will they become more wicked? If the thing is, the question arises here, according to Patanjali, he is saying you have indifference to the wicked. That doesn't mean if you have the power, he doesn't say you don't power. If a person feels that he is Rajasic enough. You see, now here you have to see your Swadharma. Now Patanjali's yoga is meant for people who want to be really sattvic. For them, indifference is the way. But in Gita you will find Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna to fight, to kill the wicked. You see that advice is also given. So in a way, if your Swadharma is Rajasic, if you are a Rajasic person, then you have to kill the wicked. So that's why when the wickedness rises in the world, when adharma rises, Lord himself says in the Gita, he creates, but that is his prerogative. He does create situations where the wicked are taken care of. Now, if you feel your role is to take care of the wicked, that means there is some kind of rajas in you, and you will be forced to do it. Even if you don't want to, you will be doing it. But this is meant for sattvic people who give more importance to the life of spirit. So for them, indifference is there. That is why you have to see these things in context. So avoiding, it's not avoiding, it is indifference. There is a difference between avoiding and indifference. You don't have to avoid. Avoiding is a kind of running away. Whereas you face him, but you be indifferent to his wickedness. You don't get wicked, or maybe you don't get upset, or don't spoil your time and energy. Don't go into tamas because of somebody else's wickedness. That is the message, very important message, which Bhagavan Sri Krishna gives in the Gita, and also Jesus says. What he means is that if there is a reaction, and if you try to remedy by wickedness, then it is you who are going to lose. Wicked people will be taken care of somehow or the other when the wickedness becomes more. There is a auto corrective mechanism which takes care of this wickedness. You just have to pray. If the sattvic people have a sattvic solution, Rajasic people may fight, but then they will incur some more karma, and then they will also be losing certain things. If you see the Mahabharata war, that was not the best solution. You see how many children he lost. Sri Krishna is giving the highest advice, but at the same time he knows that Arjuna has to fight. So he says, you fight, no problem, because you are born as a Kshatriya, you have Rajas, the element of Rajas in you. But you can't force. There were certain people who did not take part in the war. They preferred to stay out of it. They were the sattvic people. So it depends on the situation and the circumstance. But for a sattvika person, for a person who wants to practice Patanjali's yoga, if he gets involved always in politics and quarrels and all those things, he cannot have a peaceful mind. If you want a calm, undisturbed mind, then only these things are valid. So now, yeah. So there is one question. I'll end with that. Ravilingam has asked this question. That thanks Swamiji for explaining the Jesus sermons. I understand better now. Why is his message not in a simple, straightforward language that is easier to understand? You see, it is very easy. Only thing is, we have been conditioned by uh, our education, which has made us difficult people. If you give the message of Jesus to simple, guileless people, childlike people with childlike nature, they will understand it properly. But if complicated people who want to be worldly, that is seen very often, that is seen most of the time, the great, wonderful, simple teachings of people like Jesus, of Sri Ramakrishna and others are tortured and twisted by people who are attached to the world. That is why Sri Ramakrishna and even Jesus, he said, if you want to follow me, give up your riches and come follow me. He insisted on renunciation because he knew if worldly people interpret his teachings, they will somehow justify their worldliness. They will say that what we are doing is fine. Jesus has said we can do this. So they will blame Jesus, they will rather misconstrue Jesus' teachings. So they are really easy, but because of our difficulties which are associated with our training, wrong education, which makes us intellectual, but not only makes us intellectual, intellectualism is not bad. But if it is combined with worldliness, then we will try to justify every worldly act that we do. We will try to find out the meaning from the biblical teachings which will suit our life rather than adjust our life to suit the simple teachings of Jesus. His teachings are very clever, very clear. There is absolutely no ambiguity. If you just, that's why he said, blessed are the pure in heart. Very simple teachings. Holy Mother also gave some wonderful teachings. She said, if you want peace of mind, my dear child, don't look at the fault of others. Now, how many of us practice? We want to look at others' faults. We revel. We get joy by looking at others' faults. And then we keep on crying and going to different people and saying, I don't have peace of mind. She says, if you want peace of mind, don't see the fault of others. We don't tend to practice that. We don't even bother to practice, and then we blame. So the teachings are very simple, and people will say, Holy Mother's teachings are simple. Let us study the Upanishads, let us study the Gita. But the essence of Gita, when it is given in the form of the biblical teachings, simple parables of Sri Ramakrishna, of Jesus, they are simple. We have to remember they are simple provided you make your mind simple and not complicated, and not be carried away by our the pride in learning that we have. That is the first thing one has to give up. That is why, and a little bit of ego. Ego is also responsible for developing that pride. All learned people, really learned people, may not be having pride in their learning, but people, if they have this ego. So the egolessness is very important, and that is why we find these teachings of Jesus a bit difficult if we look at from the lens of our own ego and preconceived notions. If you somehow look at it from the viewpoint of a child who is just curious, just look at the Bible and accept them as they are. The child will have no difficulty. The child's vision, if it is there, then you will not find these teachings difficult. Okay, so it is very easy. I hope I've given you a convincing answer. Ravi? Yes. So I take your leave now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.